Hi, good morning.
Hi, Kurinji.
Hi.
Good morning.
So my voice is fine, right?
Yes, voice is okay. Farah is also here, I think.
The public authorities. So yeah, I think enforcement is a nasty problem to solve, but there are ways around it. So there is sustained engagement, and of course there is use of IT applications and public awareness.
I would actually slightly differ from this approach, Tanushree approach here, to say that of course there is a role for command and control, and we had this discussion very recently. There is a need for a city level air quality management cell with dedicated staff for enforcement, and this will, Ranjit, probably have to be under the so-called commission that you spoke about earlier, that has been not yet set up but been mandated. But ultimately, the answer to some of these enforcement problems will have to be sector specific solutions. Like, for instance, when we talk about CND, and there's been enough work done on CND by CSC and others, the solution is not the dumping. The problem is not the dumping there, but the problem is that the waste is being generated and it is not being regulated properly. So Delhi and other cities have these CND processing sites, which by themselves are not functioning very well. But that is the solution. Similarly, for construction, there is a lot of construction material that is often dumped on the pavement. Now, here again, I think the plan mentions this very briefly, but in the kind of starting paragraphs, but not in the plan themselves, that when you give out a construction permit, when the PMC is giving out a permit to consent to operate or consent to establish, that consent should have the criteria that these kind of anti-emission norms should be built into that consent conditions, and that enforcement can then be done perhaps through with the help of technology. You set up a on-site monitoring sensor-based monitor, and this has to be done at the cost of the constructor. So these kind of things is where there is a lot of hand-holding required to the PMC, to the PCMC, where these norms will have to be built into their building bylaws or their consent mechanisms. And this is slowly happening in other states. In Ahmedabad, we've been trying to do this consent bit, but then a lot more needs to be done.
Tejaswini, did you want to go before? I have to give Priyadarshini a chance to talk about biomass burning. So let her go first. And Mr. Radhakrishnan, if you could mute yourself. And if not, yeah, there you go. Thank you so much. Yeah, Priyadarshini, go first, and then I'll ask Tejaswini to jump in.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to sort of add on to this whole garbage burning discussion, and also I feel
the voice isn't
many
coming through
people
great,
have said
Priyadarshini.
this, that how we recognize different sources and their contribution
Priyadarshini, your network is great.
is going to have an
Priyadarshini?
impact on the plan. And I am actually rather...
Priyadarshini?
Yeah, it could be a connection issue.
Yeah,
is it better now? Hello?
No, it isn't.
Hello? Hello?
No, we can't hear you very well.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
No.
Can you hear me now? Yeah.
Your voice is coming as if it's in slow motion. At least that's how I'm hearing it.
Hello?
We can't hear you, Priyadarshini. Do you want to disconnect and connect again? Just try that, maybe if it helps. I don't know. Tejaswini, you want to go and let's see if yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Hi everyone, I'm Tejaswini. I'm from the Breezo team at Blue Sky Analytics. We've actually worked very closely with Ranjit and team to build the Pune dashboard that was shared by Kurinji as well. I'll share a link in the chat for all of those who haven't seen. Yeah, so I just wanted to chime in a little bit on monitoring and even the source apportionment bit of the discussion. So I think it's fairly well established that, we're all looking for better data and more comprehensive in a sense to identify these sources and thereby make these plans. And in light of that, I feel many conversations I've had with you and other people individually, and even through this discussion, I do sense that we need to kind of move beyond monitoring just through, beyond our analysis just based on ground stations. And I feel that that's what we tend to do a lot right now, also because, of course, there has been a limitation. It's not been widely available. But now that even under NCAP, so even West Bengal, I know, has signed, an agreement to do more satellite-based monitoring. And the reason I say this is also because I worry that we lose some key insights when we only tend to focus on the sensors. A solid ground network is integral. Like, you can't even do your satellite-based analysis based on that. But at the same time, it's impossible to, put these sensors everywhere. It's huge, like it's very capital intensive. And I think that's where I feel that just a general push by the civic society, even the state pollution control boards that we will be giving these recommendations to adopt these newer methods of monitoring, to move beyond just sensors, is going to be really vital. Because in a holistic sense, it is going to be a cheaper exercise, but also it's going to be give you so many more data points to plan out of. And I think it ties really well with source apportionment as well. Source apportionment through satellites, if I'm to say, is going to be will take some time, but at present I see it as a very collective effort. So if say we have the dashboard for Pune and we see some odd red spots that highlight that we don't necessarily take into analysis generally speaking, but we see that, okay, this is a red spot, maybe it highlights that there could be a fire, like Ravindra was mentioning, right? And then at that level, if we work with people on the ground and we can collectively come up with, okay, why is there a red spot there? Or why is the pollution concentration more there? I think that could be a great way of even starting this source apportionment exercise.
Go ahead, Polash, add what you want to say. And it would be interesting for us to understand what are the pros and cons, or what are the limitations and advantages, some of those you mentioned, Tejaswini, in terms of satellite-based monitoring, which doesn't mean that you don't do ground-based monitoring, as you also mentioned. They complement one another. But can one pick out point sources if it's small garbage burning, but a numerous of them? How does one deal with that, etc.? Is something that would be good to understand. Maybe not today as a specific point, because it probably will get a little technically detailed, but it would be useful for us to understand that. And also, thanks for sharing that some states have now started accepting satellite-based monitoring as a possible source of information. Because I think in cities like Pune, we haven't heard anything about them accepting this information. I think it's either it's the monitor or it's nothing else. In fact, in the case of Pune, it's either a government-based monitor or it's nothing else. They haven't even recognized the smart city monitors as an official source of information. So those are some of the things that we'll need to work on. But Polash, go ahead. Yeah, you wanted to add something.
No, I have very little to add, except that this is a great point. It is, of course, the way in the future, way to the future, where we look at not just ground-based monitoring, but combine it somehow with modeling based on internet satellite-based sources. And especially, again, coming back to my sectoral interventions, for specific sources, it will be more effective than others. Like for instance, of course, Punjab, Haryana, everyone knows that these are being used to identify crop fires. But also other sources like perhaps, I think Ravindra was talking about illegal burning and perhaps illegal brick kiln and so on. So that can be that can be integrated very well. But my point was that for any air quality management plan to factor in these these dynamic inputs, which are based on non-static source apportionments, there has to be a mechanism to deal with what the sources are, and that is the governance framework that Ranjit, you were talking about again. So unless I think we have that first, this will continue to be a challenge. Even if we have the satellite-based inputs, there needs to be a framework to deal with that. Yes, just wanted to add that.
Thanks. Were there any other comments that people wanted to make on sort of the air action plan or some of the sectoral interventions that we've talked about? Sanskriti has suggested that she wants to talk a little bit about, I mean, I think there are two things that we should discuss. I think we have a little time to discuss both how do we approach or the engagement with the political leadership, because a lot of the things that we are saying as you were making your presentation, I felt that if there was a real interest in solving this problem, there are so many hundreds of ideas, creative ideas, new ideas, use of technology that could be used to address this. But there seems to be a tremendous amount of apathy, both at the city level, at least as far as we can tell, all the way up to the state government level to even want to deal with this issue. And because there's so much apathy, they just sort of going through the motions of making a plan, the plans are badly made and so on and so forth. So how does one actually have this engagement? And the second part about it is how do we strengthen community engagement? There was a brief point on that in the CEW presentation. And something else that, yeah, thanks for reminding Sanskriti, is that we've all been talking a little bit about whether people themselves understand the connection between air pollution and health. And there seems to be some tenuous understanding of what air pollution really means and how does it affect one's health. And I think that's where a lot of the political, therefore, will in terms of trying to address this problem is lacking. So before we move into these three things, Sunita, you wanted to say something about the sectoral interventions.
Yeah.
Let's give ourselves a little time to talk about these three important issues.
Hello, can you hear me?
Ranjit, would you want me to add the sectorial points now or
I
later?
also want to say something, Ranjit, so please factor that in.
Okay, so Sunita, then, and Sujit, did you want to say something also? So
Yeah, I wanted to say something. I don't know whether you can hear me or not, because I've been having a lot of problems with the internet.
Now we
we can hear you. So after Sunita goes, I'll ask you to make your points. Sunita, go ahead.
Thank you. So on the sectoral aspect, every builder has to, go through the environmental clearance process. In the environment clearance process, there is a mechanism where we will have to comply to the conditions specified in the EC, right? And this covers air quality monitoring and also the mitigation measures. Okay, now that is totally left to the whims and fancies of the builders. There is no whatsoever monitoring of that. And moreover, the way the air quality monitoring happens is very weird. Air quality is, it's a temporal thing. There's a time variation, seasonal variation to the whole thing. And it is also a spatial thing. So basically a point in time and also, so time and space, both are the two aspects associated with the air quality monitoring. And the way it is monitored is probably once a year at one location, where probably you attach it to your 6-monthly report and you should be okay, because that's the time no construction has happened. But what you really see, which Ravindra Sinha ji and even Palash pointed out, is that the sectoral impact monitoring is pathetic, not complying to the conditions. And with the new EIA draft 2020 that comes in, even that will go, because there is no specification and the monitoring that the builder has to do on a regular basis in their site onto the levels in a continuous fashion. If that is not there, the air quality associated with construction sector is not going to improve at all. So let's be very clear. If we go with a high level action plan, nothing is going to change.
Thanks for pointing out though that gap also, and that's also just large scale construction, which falls under the purview of EC. It probably leaves out a lot of other building activities. Actually, even Metro Rail was supposed to have air monitoring, air quality monitoring, because it's a large scale construction right through the heart of the city. Sujit, go ahead.
Can I be heard now?
Yes, we
Hello,
can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Sujit is the
Yeah,
trustee
okay.
of.
I just
in case people are not familiar with who he is. Yeah, go ahead, Sujit.
Yeah, so the only point I wanted to make was, have we actually even reviewed what has happened in Delhi many years back when CSC took up the issue of air pollution, and it, with the help of the courts, evicted a lot of small industries under the assumption that air pollution needs to be controlled, which it does need to be controlled, obviously. But I think the whole direction was very elitist. That is a criticism of what happened in Delhi. Now, have we looked at any of those issues to see, because we have been talking about all kinds of technical ways of measuring pollution, but there are certain obvious things like the way in which the cities look at, I'll just restrict it to transportation, the way the cities encourage personal vehicle growth, and that is causing the maximum pollution as far as Pune is concerned. I know we are not only talking about Pune, but that's the example which...
No, today we are talking about Pune. We are talking about Pune. So yeah, you can make it Pune specific.
No, I thought you were talking about the Pune region. It's not only for Pune and Pune region and all that. But okay, that's even better if you're talking only about Pune. But in Pune, the metro which you cited, Ranjit, and the kind of infrastructure which is built for personal vehicles is a major problem. We don't have much of stubble burning. We don't have too many coal-based fire plants here. I mean, energy plants here. But the major thing is coming from transportation. Now, how does the city look at transportation is a major elephant in the room. And instead of looking at that, we are talking about involving people, which we need to do, of course, but the kind of people which get involved, if they're only going to look at it in an elitist manner, then I think at the end, what's going to happen is that it will only hit the people who are the majority, the poor, and the ones on the margins. And merely the construction industry, the auto industry, they will go ahead with whatever way they are doing, because they have got all the bureaucrats in their pockets. So, I mean, I might be probably exaggerating in my language, but I think I wanted to make this point to get included in the whole discussion. Thanks.
And I think a lack of convergence between, what the NCAP talks about. We love to always talk about the National Urban Transport Policy, which talks about, encouraging non-private modes, etc. But one doesn't find a lot of sort of mention of that. And I think Sujit's point about the court interventions in Delhi is useful, because I think CSC sort of said at that time, long time ago, not a criticism of CSC per se, but a lot of the emphasis was on improving public transport, turning them to CNG, electric buses. One still sees a lot of that, but almost or absolutely no mention of vehicle number constraints. We understand, my team tells me that the draft plan for Pune, for instance, had the parking policy in it, and yet the final plan didn't have it. So the idea that private vehicles have to be restricted hasn't hasn't appeared at all. In fact, a lot of the air quality action plans still talk about road widening, flyovers as a way of reducing congestion. So that's another area, in addition to this wall-to-wall paving, which runs completely counter to the sort of vision of reducing emissions from vehicular emissions, which is also sort of which is also particularly dangerous because of the kinds of pollutants that are coming out of vehicles as opposed to perhaps some of the other kinds of pollutants. So not all pollutants is the same, is something that we've learned from you guys, and the impacts of different pollutants on our health can be quite dramatically different from one another. So so I think that's what we've sort of understood sitting here in Pune. So if there are some comments on that, also having looked at the 102 plans and whether this is another point of advocacy. Of course, it's happening at the city level, but whether some of this needs to be taken up at the state and national level also.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, the NCAP clearly stated that there has to be synergy across AMRUT, Smart City Mission, NUTP, and NCAP. But points such as you very rightly pointed out, construction of flyovers, multi-level parking structures, road widening are all very much part of the current clean air plans, which basically are just, accommodating an increase in private vehicles. And that should not be the case. In addition, the other point these plans also include on addressing, road dust is use of mechanical sweepers, street sweepers. And that's more of a concern for me because it's symbolic to just invest money into it, procure these devices for the cities, and municipal corporations are actually doing that because it's just a checklist. It's a box that they can easily check that we've acquired a mechanical sweeper. So I mean, yes, these are all issues in terms of what the municipality can do within its purview, but will it actually be beneficial towards clean air or not? Of course, road widening, multi-level parking structures is an issue, but I think a shorter term issue which we could potentially as researchers and as civil society need to argue against is this purchase of mechanical sweepers. They're expensive and I'm not sure how useful they are.
And we were very surprised to see the allocation of money for mechanical road sweepers under the first tranche of 10 crores that the city got, even though Pune's air action plan had no mention of it. In fact, that was the only thing that was money was allocated for an item which was not in the approved air action plan. The green buffers, the cycle track, all of that was there. But there was no mention at all that we wanted to address the issue of road dust by doing mechanical sweepers. And yet, lo and behold, 2 crores allocated. And that's the first tender that I'm sure will come out, and they'll buy those trucks and they'll run for a while and then they'll break down, and we know how that all plays out. And so if there's also evidence that this is happening across the board, across all cities, then perhaps we could also use that to strengthen our advocacy, or at least raising the question of, is this an effective use of that money?
Priyadarshini is back. So did she have a chance to talk? I was cut out in between, so I'm not sure.
She was having some connectivity issues. Priyadarshini, you want to give it one shot? Try again.
Try it again.
I already wrote my comments in chat. But am I audible right now?
You are.
Okay.
Yeah, you're audible, and we would rather hear you because we can't read that fast.
Okay. So the point I just wanted to make is that when we are talking about garbage burning, there are different nuances and levels to it, and each one needs to be addressed separately. So there is one aspect of garbage burning that is happening at the garbage dumps of the municipal corporations. Then there is illegal garbage burning happening on various public locations. But there is also within people's building premises, they are burning garden waste, for example, especially in this season because there is too much of it. and there are solutions that can be given to them, but those are not being implemented. Then something which we don't think of much, but is increasingly will become problem as more and more buildings hire security, 24/7 security. Security guards during winter will burn some garbage just for at night time. The more such small fires are on, that is also going to be a significant contributor. There is also a lot of cooking that is happening on biomass in urban areas. Because I mean, we see people taking away wood from cut down trees, so obviously they are using it for cooking. And if you go to Basti areas, there is a lot of wood burning still happening. There also solutions can be given. So each of these will have to be looked at separately, because the solutions have to be very, very different from each other for each of these. That was the main point I wanted to make.
No, thank you for that, Priyadarshini. Before you leave, just tell us who you are. There may be some people on the group you may not know. Most know
Okay.
you, I know.
Yeah.
But
Okay. Okay. I run a social enterprise, Samuchit Envirotech, and I'm also the national convener of Indian Network on Ethics and Climate Change.
yes, thank you, Priyadarshini. So Sanskriti, did you want to kick off the next discussion? We have about 10 minutes, but just in terms of, civil society, whichever one we want to take up, either engagement with the political sector. We do notice, for instance, that there is very little interest in this topic at the political level, and we don't know how this is in other cities. Maybe Delhi is an exception because it's just been highlighted by the media so much, and perhaps that's the way to go, that you keep ramping up the media presence, and that's what catches the attention of the politicians eventually. It takes time, but it eventually happens. And so one of the things that we discussed with Brizo was to try and get ward level information about air pollution. And if we could do that, then perhaps we could take that information to the ward, to the local corporator, and then talk about or rank the wards in terms of air pollution. Those are the kinds of tricks that we'll have to use to try and see if we can grab the attention of a politician. No politician wants to hear or learn that their ward is the fifth most polluted ward in the city. And so if there are sort of other ways to try and engage, because we engage a lot with the bureaucrats, because that's where I think a lot of our comfort levels lie. But what is it that we need to do in order to better engage with, better educate, and make more sensitive the political decision makers? So if there are some comments on that, some experiences to share, would love to hear that. Sanskriti, if you want to say something and then open it up to others also, we could do that.
No, it's basically for us locally also to think through how we want to run public engagement around equality, because the city government is not doing any engagement from its side. We have to figure out how we want to do it, how we want to, raise, and as you say, if we can have like a Brizo-like input, which is disaggregating it by ward level. And if we are able to say, rank these wards, that's a good idea, Ranjit, to say that, we are expressing our such survection like ranking from the citizens' point of view. We are doing a citizens' ranking of how all the terrible things in our wards to our for equality, but the causative factors also. If walkability or connectivity in my ward is very poor, that is certainly one of the reasons which is causing other environmental damage, whether it's tree felling for road widening and therefore poor equality or whatever. So working out our civil society engagement amongst ourselves in Pune is quite important, and I think we should move the dialogue into that, maybe not in the next 3 minutes, but we should set up some more discussions around that for ourselves in Pune.
Yeah, yes, of course, we do need to do that, and not to sort of paint a very bleak picture. There are some political leaders who are interested in this issue for just reasons of their own understanding, and therefore they may be a conduit for us to engage with the other political leadership and see if this can sort of make it in their agenda. I know air pollution and climate change are low on people's agenda. And therefore, if we also need to rephrase this as a public health issue and not talk about it as an environmental issue at all, and not use the word environment, because environment is perhaps not a great word to use in the current political or any political scenario, and really talk about it as a public health issue, which is what COVID did. It didn't talk about it as an environment issue or something else. It talked about it as a, I mean, it was, and so is air pollution, a direct public health issue. So if there are any comments on that, then go ahead. And Polash, you wanted to quickly talk about the, you also wanted to talk a little bit about the
health risk communication plan.
I just wanted to make a small point, Ranjit, before we move on, because you got this. So I was just wondering whether we should think of like a people's...
Audio has become suddenly very mild, Sanskriti. You have done something.
I'm a very mild person anyway. So I was saying that maybe we should think of a people's ESR, you know, a collective of Pune residents groups, etc. Like a people's ESR where we can log on and say that, you know, oh, my citizens elected representatives panel is doing a really bad job because I have X, Y, and Z issues in my...
नहीं, आपके साथ ही मतलब viewer only the primary person we wanted to talk to. So,
right. I'll just quickly interject. I was talking about Pune, the Pune air plan. Air is air information.
Others could please mute their phones. And also, for those who haven't yet raised any issues or raised a point, please feel free to talk up. This is all of us just civil society people. So nobody's, I mean, there are some experts here, but many of us are not experts. So don't feel shy about saying what you want to say. This is an open forum. So I invite you to make your comments. Yeah, Polash.
Yeah, so over the last year, since about July last year, 2019, along with the PMC, we've been working on a health risk communication program that will enable the PMC to set out alerts which are AQI linked to different kinds of stakeholders. So the different vulnerable groups, migrant workers, people, street vendors, policemen, the elderly citizen, and of course school children. Of course, this is right now in a plan component, but certain parts of the plan have started operating. This is a plan that is owned by the PMC, and the PMC is designed to operate it. Of course, COVID has played a big spoilsport in all of this. But pre-COVID, they started with the school flags program. Also, IITM is a major player in this, and this program has been done in Ahmedabad as well. So essentially what I'm trying to say is that there is an existing opportunity for us to strengthen this health risk communication and include different kinds of stakeholders, and therefore strengthening the entire air quality movement. Because the only way, like Ranjit said, that there is stronger action eventually on the key emission sources is that there is enough awareness and there is enough pressure that is applied from various different choke points. Your political appointees, your municipal councillor, and all of that will eventually come from centralizing the health risk. So that is something I've shared the link in the chat box. I'll be happy to discuss later on as well. I'll yield the floor now.
Great, thanks for that, Polash. And, you know, I mean, this committee that has been set up, for instance, it doesn't have a political person on the committee, these city level committees. And so again, you know, sort of they're kept out of the discussions, and the only time that they see something on this is when the environment status report is submitted every year. And I've heard comments from politicians saying, "वो क्या ESR हर साल वही उसमें दिखाते रहते हैं, उसमें क्या discuss करना है?" There was a greater discussion in Pune on the map of India and Kashmir, whether it was full or not, and nobody was looking at the contents inside. So, so that's a situation that we need to change, I think. Anuja, you wanted to say something. Please go ahead.
Yes. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity, because I've only heard your names and this is the first time I can hear you all talk and share and see you personally. I represent Warrior Moms, and we recently started our Pune chapter just because it seems like Pune is not as bad as Delhi NCR, and we don't have 1000 AQI, but Pune isn't what it was when I came to do my master's here. So it's a shocking, it's a shock to me that how did Pune become this? We have decided that we'll address the issues and enforce what is there but not being enforced. So whichever way we can be part of this, because the intent of the mayor or the government, not talk about government because it becomes unreachable kind of a thing. Whoever is the local corporator or the person involved in the ward, we can work with them and get the things enforced, because I definitely see the burning as a major issue. Every morning, even though Pashan has 63 AQI, I wake up with the tire burning smell. And I always wonder, how is it possible that it's 63? I can't imagine what is 999 breathing like. So, it's very important that we have to do in our areas. And Warrior Moms, is definitely pushing, like Dr. Arvind from Lung Care Foundation says, the air pollution is national emergency. And even though we haven't reached there, like Pune as a city, we must look at it so that we don't reach there. The mess with the metro and all of that, and the garbage mountains, it's not looking very good as a future. So we have been blessed with a lot of green, and we should preserve it, not in the name of cutting trees to make cycling paths. I heard it happened. So that's very embarrassing that people should come up with those kind of solutions that cut oxymoron kind of thing. So we don't have to cut things and create cycling paths. We definitely have a good city, and Aund is a very good example. They have done a lot of good things. So whenever we meet next, or however Warrior Moms can do to make things better and connect the health part to the air pollution. And we are already doing it. We have a smoke-free Diwali campaign where we are asking people that we don't need firecrackers to celebrate Diwali or any other festival or any wedding or life event, because that contributes as chemicals being inhaled by our children and people. So we are already doing that, but on a very smaller scale. You guys are all researchers, and you have the actual data, but we are happy to enforce and help in doing whatever to make Salbhar 60 AQI. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anuja. Yes, it's kind of this broad group of stakeholders who need to come together to kind of push the agenda. I think we've reached the end of our allotted time today. So I would, if there are any last words, Farah, if you would like to say something briefly before we wrap up the proceedings today.
I think that we had a fairly good discussion, and it needs to be done in more detail. I completely and 100% agree with what Sujit said, and that is inclusivity. Because still we do not think of how it is going to affect each and every person living in that particular area. Tackling this huge demon is going to be difficult. Okay, and I think we need to work towards that. It's a very challenging road ahead, but we need to do this in bits and pieces and move forward. So yes, I think let's do this again sometime. We can have a little bit more of a nuanced discussion where we can come up with certain recommendations. Maybe we can start a document straight away, which can be shared amongst us, where we can put our thoughts sector-wise. We can enlist a little bit of recommendations, and then we can start working our way upwards from there.
Sounds good. Thanks, Farah.
Thank you, Ranjit.
Yeah. Anybody from CEW wants to say something before we?
Yeah. So yeah, thank you for this Very interesting conversation, and like all the points related to the enforcement, and also the still some clarity needs to be done to understand the emissions from different sources. All these points are well taken, and I think the overall this discussion on also on adding the health aspect into this action plan, along with using some novel approaches like satellite information, um, uh, and enhancing the capacity building among the pollution control boards, which need to be done as part of these conversations. I think overall the conversation is very enriching, and we will keep adding a few points and recommendations.
And what we could do as a next step, at least for those who are in the city, and of course for those who are on this program itself, on this webinar itself, sort of take a look at each item in the air action plan. I mean, CEW did a great job of sort of compiling it together and giving us that big picture view, which is very important. But now sort of even looking at each intervention and asking questions about it, we certainly have a lot of questions about it. And to see, if there's a chance to improve these air action plans. That was another point that came up in our earlier discussions, that are we now saddled with this plan because this is the CPCB approved plan, or do we still have a chance to go back as civil society and say, hey, you didn't involve us when these plans were made, there were deadlines, but here are things that we feel now need to be included as an addendum to this plan. So these are all the things that we could discuss in smaller groups. I would like to request either Shweta or Sharmila to wrap up if there is something to be said right at the end.
No, I think we've covered everything, but yeah, just the fact that this is not a one-off event, and there'll be more events like this, because we really want to bring out a continuously meeting, continuously discussing group of individuals which will take this issue forward. So yeah, until we meet again, let's just keep on working on this. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.